just called Rabbi Feldman, just Rabbi Haber. I'm going to take 30 seconds of the Shlach Hoidah. First of all, thank you everybody for coming. And the topic is a very fitting topic. It's Aquire, a gift of life. But because of two sides, Hashem gave me a gift. He gave me a daughter for 13 and a half years. B'chesed Hashem. Thank Hashem for that tremendously. And the last over 3 months, I also, Hashem gave me another gift. He gave me a gift of life as well. So this is all the chizuk for the whole family. The chizuk when everybody comes. We give it's the 15th yard site. The last 7 years we didn't have anything, but this year it all comes together. I would like to thank Rabbi Haber for coming. I'd like to thank Rabbi Brzezinski, Rabbi Bachlander, and for arranging everything, and Shmuel, of course. His signature is on the wires. And I would like to thank my wife for all the chizuk that she's given me the last 3 months, and the chizuk that she puts into our children. I would like to thank Rabbi Feldman for shiurim that I hear on the phone from my recliner. Now, it's not until he's a chesed, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Feldman to say the very senators.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome. It's working? Yeah. Okay. It's now been 15 years since we lost our dear Rivka Bas Chaim Aaron. And although I, and I'm sure many of you here as well, were not privileged to have known her, one just takes a look at the Edelman family, and Reb Chaim Aaron and his wife and his children, and one gets a pretty clear picture of just who Rivki was and who she would have been today. We're zoche here in the Aguda to have the Zichron Rivka library that my children and hundreds of children throughout the community benefit from every single day. And it's much better. We're zoche to have the library that we all use here on a daily, weekly basis. And it's no doubt that the neshama of our dear Rivki is looking down today, having tremendous hana that her parents, 15 years later, are still commemorating the yard site by bringing chizuk to the kehillah. Reb Chaim Aaron, he himself is a walking, talking chizuk. It was a few months that he was away from our kehillah. It was a little bit dimmer, a little bit darker in this building. Him coming back with the walker, Bez Hashem, without the walker, Mehera, has brought a tremendous sense of simcha in our kehillah. At this time, we'd like to ask Rabbi Haber to come speak. Rabbi Haber is a Rav in Brooklyn and in Deal. He's devoted his life to giving messages of inspiration and chizuk that have inspired audiences all over the world. And it's a tremendous kavod for us to have him here in our kehillah.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Feldman. Thank you for those words. And walking in, I feel instantly close to the Edelman family. I learned to stand on yeshiva, and I think the Edelman's own stand on yeshiva. No. So I grew up. Your brother in Lower East Side. Also, that's about. I'm saying in MTJ.
This one works.
This one? Okay. In fact, I'll tell you a funny little story talking about the gift of life. When I was learning in Staten Island and I was in 12th grade, I was home for an off Shabbos and I couldn't breathe so much. Long story short, I called the doctor, and my father, we called the doctor again. And the doctor said, rush to the hospital, and I had a lung collapse. My lung had collapsed 90% and whatever. And my one lung. The next year I was learning in Staten Island over Hanukkah time, about a year later, and my chest on the other side was hurting me. And I wasn't sure what to do, and I said, nah, it's nothing, because I had chest pains even after they did the surgery to repair the first lung. I still had chest pains after that, so I was feeling the pain, so I figured it was the residue of that. And I was learning, and I was sitting in the front of the base medrash in Staten Island, and your brother told me, he said, go to the hospital. Stop playing games, stop asking questions, go to the hospital. And sure enough, my other lung had collapsed. And he, I guess, helped me with the gift of life. So it's an honor to be here again. We were close to your nephew. We learned B'charusa at times. And it's a schus to be here in memory of your daughter. And it's really a schus. I don't know why the Eibishter picks certain families to deal with the pain that your family dealt with these many years ago. But I know that a family like yours, just hearing your introduction and how you're greeting as a family that has a staunch emunah and bitachon in Hashem, when something challenging happens, somehow you get stronger, not weaker. Somehow you get more positive, not negative. And I think more than anything I'm going to say tonight, that's a chizuk for all of us that are here. And so you, your wife, and your children, and how you lead your family, and how you raise your daughter, and how you raise all your other children, that's the biggest inspiration for the community here in Edison. It's an inspiration for Klal Yisrael, and that's chus, Mitzvah Hashem, to lead to all of us have a ksivah chesima taiva this year. Amen. Father, I'm speaking Ashkenaz, right? Yeah? I can mix it up? Okay, I'll throw it in a little Sephardi here and there if it makes you feel better. Okay? As you hear, I learned in Staten Island, I learned in Lake Cheder, I learned Ashkenaz before Sephardi. Okay. In this time of year, or actually a week away, in this time of year, I have this question that bothers me. I think all of us are good people. We're all good people. You're not here tonight if you're not a good person. You're either here tonight because you're honoring the Edelman family, or you're here tonight because you want to hear words of inspiration. You're obviously a good person. So if you are, why is it that we make so many mistakes? Why do we good people do so many things wrong? Mel, I understand if someone is a terrible person or someone doesn't care at all, they do a lot of things wrong, I get it. But you and me, we're good people. So why do we mess up in our davening so often, and mess up in our brachas so often, and speak lashon hara so often, and sometimes be disrespectful so often? Why is it that there's so many things we do wrong if we're good people? My hope tonight is to identify what that challenge is, and then make a small shift that will make us appreciate and see and live life completely differently. Begin with the Gemara Bava Basra. It's a very famous Gemara, and very famous for this time of year. Zok the Gemara, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan. Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani says in the name of Rav Yonasan, my desivah as opposed to me when it says, Al Kain Yoimru HaMoishlim Bo Cheshbon. Says that the Moishlim, the rulers, will tell the people, come to Cheshbon. It's somehow talking about Klal Yisrael traveling in the desert, and they're going to conquer a city. Come to this city called Cheshbon. Zok the Gemara, HaMoishlim, what does Moishlim mean? Elu HaMoishlim B'Yitzron. This doesn't mean the rulers of cities, it means the rulers, the people who rule over the Yetzer Hara. Bo Cheshbon, what does Bo Cheshbon mean? Bo Nechashev Cheshbonei Shel Olam. Come and make life-changing cheshbonos, life-changing calculations. What are those calculations? Hefsid mitzvah, keneged schar. The loss of doing a mitzvah against the gain. Uschar aveira, and the gain of doing an aveira, keneged have said the opposite, it's loss. The loss of a mitzvah against its gain, the gain of an aveira against the loss. Make this calculation, And the pasuk continues, Tibana v'tikayin, and explains the Gemara, Imata oisakain, if you do this, you make this cheshbon, Tibana v'olam hazeh, you build in this world, v'tikayin l'olam haba, and you'll establish for the world to come. Everyone knows this Gemara, it's a famous Gemara. The Gemara is basically the source for making a cheshbon hanefesh. Make a calculation. When you're Meishel B'Yitzhak, you want to control your Yetzer Hara, you want to be in control of your life. The right way to take your life in your hands is calculate, strategize, objectively look at everything you do, the gain and loss of each action you do, and determine what should be done and what shouldn't be done. But if that's simply what the Gemara is saying, I have 4 questions. Question number 1 is, I would think that when you describe someone fighting with the Yetzer Hara, you would say, Haloichmim, the battlers, the warriors. What does Meishlim mean? Like rulers. Rulers is a big position. What are we talking about? My second question is that when I think of a mitzvah, I think of schar. So how come when the Gemara starts with the mitzvah, it says, Hefsid mitzvah keneged schara, the loss of the mitzvah? Since when is there a loss? When I think about a mitzvah, I keep Shabbos, it's schar. I say Shema in the morning, there's schar. Just David Meyer, there's schar. Since when is there a hefsid to the mitzvah? First the hefsid, then the schar. And my third question is the flip side. When I think about Aveira, I think Einish. So why does the Gemara make a cheshbon of the schar Aveira? What's the schar of the Aveira that we're looking at? Why are we looking at a schar of an Aveira? We should be looking at the Einish of an Aveira if we were looking at an Aveira normally. And finally, my last question is, I understand how Cheshbon HaNefesh prepares you for the world to come. But what is it, Tibana B'Olam Hazeh? What does that have to do with this world? 4 questions. Meishlim, Hefsed Mitzvah, Schar Aveira, and Olam Hazeh. So I'd like to answer it this way. Society has convinced us. I don't know what I mean by society. I don't know who society is. I don't know if society is the media. I don't know if society might be the marketing industry. Society might be social media, it might be technology, it might be the abundance of materialism. I'm not sure what it is. But somehow society has convinced us to think small. Society likes when we care about little things. Because there's no way they could get us to buy it unless they get us to care about it. There's no way they could get us to watch it unless they get us to obsess over it. There's no way they could get us to talk about it or to think about it or to look at it unless they get us to think that this is important and this is important. And somehow, so many of us spend so much of our time on little things, on sensitivities we don't care about, on chats that are not important, seeing things that are not going to make a difference and we're not going to care we saw it in a day from now. Buying things that we don't even plan on really using. And even if we do, they don't matter that much. If there's a shift that we can make in our life that would have a dramatic impact, it'll be to shift our focus from small to big. To shift it from thinking about little things to thinking about important things. Let me try and capture it with a pasuk. The pasuk says, Hanoisen bayam darach. Hashem a person makes a path in the yam. Ubamayim azim nesiva, and in a raging waters, again you make a path. The question is, who makes paths in the water? You make a path on the land, you make a path in the forest, you make a path in a field, you make a path on a road. What do you mean a path in the water? So there's a number of answers, and each one of these answers I think is its own beautiful lesson, and the last answer is really my point today. But let me give you a few thoughts on this. The first one is that a path in the water represents tshuva, the path of tshuva the best. Because when you do tshuva properly, there's no trace of the averis you ever did. Just like a boat in the water. When the boat goes through the water, you could tell it was there for a minute. But a minute later, the boat could be humongous, and there's no trace of the fact that the boat was there. So it's not like a path on land where you leave a dent, where you leave your footsteps. When you do tshuva properly, it's like a path at sea that leaves no trace. The second explanation we heard or saw is, what are the streets like in Edison? Are they good? Are they comfortable? Are there traffic? No traffic? What's it like over here? What's it like, Josh? Not like Lakewood? It moves. It's not like Lakewood where, you know how many times I tried to do, I don't live in Lakewood, I used to, but you know how many times I tried to do 2 speeches on the same night in Lakewood, and I figured, okay, I'll go from here to there, 10 minutes space in between, but I had no idea that traffic in Lakewood doesn't move. So pretty much never got there, and I had to apologize for an hour. But the street, if all of a sudden you want to turn around, it's difficult to make a turn on the street, to make a K-turn, and it's a one-way or it's a two-way, there's oncoming traffic. But in the ocean, a turn is easy. Answer number 2, because you just go turn in the water. Answer number 2 is, the reason why we're talking about a path in the water is because when you do tshuva, it's not as complicated as you might think. It's not like trying to make a complicated K-turn on Ocean Parkway. In Brooklyn, it's making a nice wide turn like a jet ski in the sea. It's easy. The third explanation we saw, and this one I love, is that when you're driving on the road, every car goes on the same road. Every car goes on the same space. When you're traveling at the sea, every boat has a different path. There's no one path. And the same thing is like our path in life. Your path is different than his, which is different than his, which is different than theirs, which is different than mine. Every one of us have our own path, like a boat at the sea. Every person has his own journey. So A, there's no trace. B, it's easy to turn around. And C, everyone has their own path. But the answer that I'm here to share is the fourth and final answer. And that is that when a street, a road, a path in the forest is limited. A street could be 15, 20 feet, even if it's 6 lanes, maybe it's 150 feet wide. But the ocean is vast. The ocean is limitless. Stand at the edge of the ocean and look at it. It looks like it has no end. When you envision your life and the path of your life, don't create a small little footpath. Create something big and something important. I'm still not sure the message is clear enough, so I'm going to share with you a little mashal. There's actually a mashal from my son. Okay, so a few weeks ago, my son, who's named after my father, when my father was still alive, my son calls me up, and he's trying to reach me during the week, and I don't answer. Finally, I answer, and he says, I have to talk to you about something that's important for you. And I said, I don't have any time. I'm sorry. I have to respond to people, call you back and text you back. And I prepared things. I'm sorry. I can't talk now. 2 days later, he reaches me again. I'm sorry. You're catching me in the middle of everything. I can't talk now. So now Shabbos comes, and he's by my house for Shabbos. And my walk to shul is a mile, so it's about 20 minutes. So we're walking to shul, and he says to me, again, we're Syrian, so he calls me daddy. He says, Dad, what are they doing, Edison? Tati, Abba, Daddy, depends on the house. It's all good. He says, Dad, can I give you a mashal? I said, where'd you get the mashal from? He said, it's my mashal. I said, you give me your mashal? Okay, I thought it usually goes the other way around, but okay. What's your mashal? And he says, let's say I have to give to you as a gift 3 new cars. A brand new Bentley, a brand new Porsche, and a brand new Ferrari. Do they drive these in Edison? Doesn't feel like the type. A brand new Bentley, Porsche, and Ferrari. He says, you want it? I said, to be honest, not really. I can't really be a rabbi driving in a Ferrari, but I'll go with it. I have no idea where you're going with this, but okay. He says, but there's one rule. You could only have the cars if you park them in the driveway. If you park them on the street, you don't get the cars. You have to park them in the driveway to get the cars. I said, okay. He says, and when I'm about to deliver the cars, you tell me, I'm sorry, I can't take the Bentley, Ferrari, and Porsche. And I say to you, why not? He says to me, and you say you can't because you have no room in your driveway. Your driveway has in it a 1996 Chevy, a 1994 Toyota Camry, and a 1995 dented in both front doors, missing one bumper, Honda Accord. So because of that, you have no room in the driveway. He says to me, would that make sense? I said, son, I have no idea where you're going with this, but no, it would not make sense for me to say I can't take a Bentley, a Ferrari, and a Porsche because of a 30-year-old Corolla, Honda, and Chevy. He says, well, that's what you did this week. I said, what? He says, that's what you did. I was calling you about something important for you. And you instead told me you have no time because of whatever, some little text message or callback or some little thing you had to prepare. I was offering you a Bentley and you were telling me your driveway is full of Chevys. I said to him, son, I have two things to say. Number one, this mashal is chutzpah. Number two, I love it. And I'm going to use it wherever I can. Because there's so many of us that when people say, get involved in something important, learn Nochas Seder, get involved in a chesed, we're like, no, we're too busy, it's too much on my mind, I'm sorry, too much happening. You're too busy with what? You're giving up Bentleys because you're busy with your Chevy? How has society done this? How have they convinced us to follow sports and care about a team more than the players on the field? How is it that they get us to download apps that are endless, that if we live 3 lifetimes, we could never use them all? How is it that we're busy with chats that really we wish we weren't on? The only reason we're still on the chat is because they have that lousy feature that says, if you leave, that says Rabbi Joey Haber left the chat. So you don't want to tell everyone that you left the chat, so you're still on the chat. So why are you busy with the chat? Why is it that people somehow are busy on social media watching pictures that just make them jealous? Why is it that somehow they convince us to run errands and buy and return and buy and return? Every Pesach this happens. I come home on Pesach, the weeks before Pesach, and I'll see big garbage bags, let's say at the front door outside. I tell my wife, what's this? She'll say, it's garbage. I said, what do you mean it's garbage? She says, yeah, it's just, I'm cleaning for Pesach. I'm getting rid of all the junk in the house. So I said, if it's all junk, why'd you buy it in the first place? Why do we have it to throw it out? Why is it that somehow it's so easy for us to get caught up in petty conversations? Did you hear? I heard she's dating. No, I heard they broke up. No, but I heard they already put a down payment for a hall in Lakewood. No, they're dating. Why are we discussing this? When you get the invitation to this person's wedding, you don't even want to go. So why are we debating it until then? What are we doing? How did they get us? How did they get us to be sensitive? How many times did someone call up? I don't know what they meant. They came. I saw the person at the chasana. They didn't give me a smile. Oh, they're worried. They're going through something. They're not going through something. They're angry at you. They're angry at your husband. What are we doing? How many people watch things endlessly? A couple of years ago, I was on a plane going to Chicago. So back then, to make a speech. So back then, I really wasn't makbid where my seat was. Put me wherever you want. These days, I'm makbid. But anyhow, so they put me, this is what I learned. If you don't tell them where to put you, you get the last seat in the back of the plane, like behind the wings. So I was in row 32, middle seat. I sit down, and then someone else comes to sit down next to me. Maybe he's a man in his 40s or 50s. He pretty much took up a seat and a half. So the whole flight, I'm sitting like this. So I can't even look at what I'm doing because I'm sitting like this. So I'm watching him. I don't know how long the flight is from JFK to Chicago. Maybe it's 2 hours. The whole 2 hours, this 40-year-old man, 40 or 50, I don't know. The whole 2 hours, he was crushing candy. The whole 2 hours playing Candy Crush, crushing this, that, wow. I'm looking at him the whole time like, you are an adult. You're spending 2 hours, not 5 minutes, a little break. 2 hours on this game? Last week, I flew to Minneapolis. I said, now I am makbid on the seat, so sitting a little further to the front. And a Frum Yid sits down right next to me. The flight to Minneapolis is 2.5 hours. Sure enough, he's in his 40s and 50s with a yarmulke and tzitzis and all. And he was crushing candy for 2.5 hours. I was like, wow, he must be the guy's brother or something. How is it that we have grown-ups that have their driveway full of junk, full of things that they're busy with that don't matter, that are not important, that you don't even care about it while it's happening, and definitely once it's done? Why are we buying? Why are we selling? Why are we watching? Why are we chatting? Why are we talking? Why are we gossiping? Why are we looking? Why are we thinking? Why are we debating? So many things that don't matter. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that to me is very powerful. The pasuk says like this: Zok Shlomo HaMelech, Chacham Lev, a wise person, Yikach mitzvahs, grabs mitzvahs. Ve'avil, but a fool, Sefasayim Yelobeit, their lips are tired. So the pasuk doesn't seem to contrast properly, because I would have said, Chacham Lev Yikach mitzvahs, Ve'avil Yikach averis, and a fool grabs averis. Chacham Lev Yikach mitzvahs, Ve'avil Sefasayim Yelobeit, his lips are tired. What does it mean? So the Metzudas on the pasuk has a beautiful explanation. So real. He says, Chacham Lev, a wise person, is grabbing big things, is grabbing mitzvahs. Aval ha'avil, the fool, meyageyahu asvasayim levad, he's just exhausting his lips. Loimar harbe, to talk about a lot, ve'ein oisem me'uma, and he doesn't do anything. Shlomo HaMelech is saying the opposite of a Chacham Lev is not, we're not talking about a Rasha, we're talking about just a fool. What does a fool do? He talks and he talks. I'm going here, I'm coming there, this person called me, the other person needs me, I'm not sure if I should help that person or I should help that person. And they're talking, and you're like, where are you going with this? You're just exhausting your lips. The difference, I have never met anybody who is not busy. Is there anyone in Edison that's bored? I've yet to meet a person that's not busy. Every person I know is busy. The difference between productive people and unproductive people is not whether you're busy or not. The difference between productive people and unproductive people is simply what you're busy with. Productive people know how to fill their driveway with important things. Unproductive people are filling their life with junk. Not necessarily bad, just a waste. What are you doing? What are we doing? What are we spending our life on? The mistakes that good people make is not that we do vicious things. The mistake that good people make is we obsess over little things. When we start trying to essay, we start with the words, Okay, Avram, okay, Yitzchak, okay, Yaakov. The forefather, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, that's for you. Question is, why is that how we start our Shemona Esrei? So some say, simple explanation is, this introduction is what earns our right. This introduction is what earns our right to ask. Because we're going to stand before the Eivishter, and we're going to say, Eivishter, I need Chachma and Bina, I need Parnasa, I need all these things that I need. I need a refuah, I need all these things. And the Eibush is going to say to us, who are you? How do you deserve it? And our response to the Bar Olam is, I know, little old me, I don't deserve this. But you know my father. You know Avram Avinu. You know Yitzchak Avinu. You know Yaakov Avinu. In their schus, please hear my requests. Sometimes a young person will come over to you and say, I need something. And say, who are you? And they'll say, oh, my father. Oh, I know your father. Oh, for sure, come with me. That's what we're doing with the Eibush every time we talk. Eibush, you know my father. Because of them, please hear me. I recently saw from the Sefer HaPardes a different explanation that makes our point. It says, you don't know why we start with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? Because Avram Avinu was a man who was born in the smallest world possible. The entire universe at the time bowed down to sticks and stones. Couldn't have been smaller-minded people. And yet somehow in that very small world, Avram Avinu was able to see tremendous things. And him, his son, and his grandson would become the forefathers of the Am HaNivchar. By Olam, we're asking, we want to see the world the same way. We're going to say the words, we want to mean them the way Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov meant them. We're going to say the words Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibor, Hanoira. We want to know what that means. What that means is that if we internalize that and if we live that way and we think that way, that the Eibush is Godol and Gibor and Noira, that we don't have time for little and small and petty. It says, everyone knows the famous Gemara, Ein Adam Oiva Avera, Elam Kei Nichnas Bay, Rosh Shtos. What does Rosh Shtos mean? It means no one does an Avera unless a little bit of nonsense gets into your head. How'd you waste that hour? You wasted that hour because somehow you got small-minded for the hour. And you said, I have to hear that, or I have to talk about that. In fact, if you're not sure how capable of Shtus the marketing industry is, I think we have a proof right now on the streets. Have anyone here seen this new car that's out there? I'm not sure if it's a combination of a spaceship and a submarine. Maybe it's like a refrigerator on the road. Have you seen? You know what I'm talking about? What?
It's a moving block.
It's a moving block. Blech, perfect. It is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. How is it that they convince people, and it's very expensive, how is it that they convince people to buy this thing? No, I really mean it. Every time I pass by this car on the street, I do the same thing. I lean over to try to look inside and see who's the fool who bought this. And they were very smart, the company. They made the tinted windows so you can't see the guy. He's so embarrassed. He doesn't want you to see him. I'm serious. It's a ridiculous looking machine. Yet somehow, they came up with some way. You know, most expensive cars look somehow like an expensive car. So they came up with some way to make us feel that that's an item to have. It's the same people who made us feel we need another pair of shoes, and we need to make a renovation on the house, and we need to talk 2 weeks about the tiles, another 2 weeks about the carpets. Same people who said we have to be involved in some hack. Same people who convinced us that we have to talk about the future president of the United States for 12 to 18 months to discuss something we basically have one vote in. You know who you're voting for already. Any further conversation is completely svasayim yalabit. You're just exhausting your lips. No, but it's important. I know it's important. But you're discussing it isn't very important. Everyone you're talking to already made their decision. There's nobody you know that's misupik anymore. So what's the conversation? We have to see. You know how bad she is. You know the story. What's the vita? What's the story? What's the conversation? But somehow, this same smallness, this little petty path, this ruach shtus that gets inside of us, somehow convinces us to get into it. In fact, I'll share with you a story. Anyone here who went to Cheder as a kid, for sure heard this story many times. You know, there are some stories that I almost feel like Klal Yisrael grew up on these stories. We all heard these stories as we were young. We heard them maybe our third grade Rabbi, fourth grade Rabbi, fifth grade Rabbi, every one of them. The sixth grade Rabbi told the story like we never heard it before, and then the seventh grade Rabbi Nachama. Like, you know the story, I'll tell you what I mean. Like, you know the story of the Chavetz Chaim, that he was in a hotel with someone else, and they tasted the food, and the owner came over and said, what's the story with the food? And the other person said, no, it's missing some salt. And the Chavetz Chaim, then the owner went away, and the Chavetz Chaim, you know the story I'm talking about. So I was trying to say, those are stories we grew up on. So this is another one of those. You've all heard this story before, but I'm sharing it with you because this story haunts me. The story is of the Nitziv. I believe he was standing at his Siyum Hashas for the 1,000th time. I'm not sure if that was the number, but I think it was the 1,000th time. And the Nitziv said, I'd like to share with you a story of my childhood. I was a little boy, and maybe I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And I was in Cheder. My parents were poor, and they were spending extra money to give me a tutor. And one day I'm walking by the kitchen, and I hear my father and mother talking. They don't realize I'm behind the door, and I'm peeking by the door, and I stop because I hear my name. I hear them talking about me. And my father tells my mother, listen, our son, he can't learn. He's not good. He doesn't have the zitzfleish. He doesn't have the focus. He doesn't have the kishrin. He can't do it. I think it's time we take him out of Cheder. Maybe we'll make him a shoemaker, something nice. Make him an honest yid, and that'll be it. He says, and I remember peeking through the crack of the door, tears on my mother's cheeks. I said to myself, I can't cause my mother that kind of pain. And in that moment, behind the door, without my parents seeing, I said, I am going to change. I walked inside, I said, Tati and Mommy, I am going to do my best. He says, and I'm standing here today because of that moment, having finished Shas so many times. But here's the part of the story that haunts me. He said, imagine I was a shoemaker. I would have been a beautiful one. I would have cut shoes properly. I would have cut the soles. I would have sewn it properly. Would have been comfortable shoes. My customers would have been happy with me. I would have been honest. If they gave me too much change, I would have returned the change. I would have been a beautiful person. And I would have stood before Bezdin Shamala, and the heavenly court would look at me and say, okay, where's Shas? And I would have said, what are you talking about? They would have said, no, where's Shas? And I would say, no, maybe you got the wrong person. Maybe I'm on the wrong line. I do shoes. I don't do Shas. And they would have said to me, no, where's Shas? 1,000 times. I would have said, what? And then they said, where's your Svarim on Chumash? I would have said, I don't know what you mean. I know Chumash Rashi, that's it. Where's your Svarim on Gemara? And I would have said, what? And they would have rolled out all that I could have done. And I would have said, no, what are you talking about? You're not talking about me. And they would have said, yes. Had you made a big decision when you were younger, this could have been you. But because you decided to focus on shoes, this is you. That story haunts me. You want to know why it haunts me? Because I am pretty confident that I am a good person. I think I'm a good person. But I have no idea. When I stand before Bezdin Shamala, what are they going to say? Are they going to say, Joey, nice job? Are they going to say, do you realize what you could have done? And I'm going to say to them, who, me? And they say, yes, you. Get your head out of all those little things, all those conversations, and you could do dramatic, important things. Clear out your driveway. Make space for expensive things in your life. There are people who know how to do this. There are people who know how to do big things. And to be honest, big things don't usually even start so big. They start with something small that builds again and again and again till it becomes something big. In fact, I'll share with you a couple of examples. Last week I got a call out of a friend in Lakewood. His name is Yitzchak Ginsburg. He lost his wife before the summer. They left 4 daughters. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. Baal Chesed, he's always calling for somebody else's need. So Yitzchak says, I just have to share with you a story. He says, over the summer, there's a person or an organization that when a family comes in from Eretz Yisrael, they're a couple, they have a child, and the child's not well, this organization sets them up. It gives them an apartment, it helps them get insurance, so that they could come and do surgeries in the big hospitals, Columbia, Cornell, or whatever, over here. He says, so this summer there was a family that came from Eretz Yisrael, they had a son with a disease, a tumor, I think, a little child, maybe it was a daughter, I don't remember. And this organization, they found a way, this man who was in charge found a way, they put the family up in an apartment in Lakewood, a basement in Lakewood. Yitzchak says to me, in the middle of the summer, the man who's the head of this organization calls me out, calls up Yitzchak and says, Yitzchak, I feel like they could use a Shabbos in the Catskills, they could use a weekend off. Do you know anyone who has space for them to spend the Shabbos in the mountains? Yitzchak says, let me see what I could do. He puts out some advertisements, and a lady calls, says, yes, I'll be happy to have a family come to my house or my bungalow in the mountains for the whole weekend. Now, stop right there. That's unbelievable in itself. I don't know, most people that have, whether you have a bungalow or a house in the mountains, it's Shabbosim, it's like there's people sleeping on couches and there's Einiklach and son-in-laws and all that, and like, now you have room for this whole family from Eretz Yisrael. They might not be normal people. But she did it with a happy heart. Yisrael says to me, he called me, it was on Friday. He says, the surgery happened for this kid this week in Pittsburgh. And the host, a lady from the mountains, got on a plane and flew to Pittsburgh to spend a day with the parents of the child that spent the Shabbos in our house. I said, wow. Any one of us, if you said the idea, we say, well, it's a good idea, but I'm just too much going on. I have text messages, I have emails, I have things, I have buyers, I have sellers, I have things. I push it. We can't untangle our heads to be able to think clearly enough to say, let me get on a plane for a day, fly 2 hours, spend 5 hours, come back 2 hours later, and be okay. We can't untangle our lives. I said, I can't believe someone could do something so momentous. Let me give you another example. This example is unique to me because it's my mother. My mother basically, from when she wakes up to when she goes to sleep for 6 days a week, she is serving our community non-stop. She teaches Kalas, teaches Taras and Mishpacha, but she's taught one-on-one, at this point, thousands. And every single one of them keep up with her 10, 15 years later. She's nonstop with teaching. And then when she gets finished teaching, she's answering questions. My father, the Shalom, was a Rav. She'd bring the questions to my father, and she'd go answer the people. In the process, she started to realize that a lot of these couples have fertility issues. So she basically heads an organization for infertility in the Syrian community. She's like nonstop. My mother lives a few blocks away from me. She's almost never in my house, like hanging out with my kids. She doesn't have time for that. And she does all this for free. Like she'll teach a Kala 15 lessons in a row. At the end of the 15 lessons, she gets like a platter or like a spoon. They give spoons. I'm like, Ma, you have a lot of spoons. Like, I don't know. And what's so unbelievable is she went to public school, elementary school, and high school. But she has the space and has the mental capacity to be able to start. And she taught one Kala, and then she taught another Kala, and then she got better at it, and then she got better at it, and then she got better at it, until she became an incredible expert at it. And then she became great at giving them advice, and great at holding their hand. And before you know it, she's nonstop serving other people. That's how it goes. We start and say to ourselves, we have a week left. You don't even have a week. Decide tonight something in your life that's bigger than what it is right now. Something in your life that you want to incorporate, that you want to hopefully make it snowball into something incredible. Because what the Yetzer Hara does is actually the opposite. What he does is he tells you, waste 10 minutes today. And once he got you to waste 10 minutes today, he tells you, waste 20 minutes tomorrow. You know what? You have a Seder every morning. You learn at 7. You never start at 7. So just show up at 7:15. And then battle for 15 minutes. So don't start learning till 7:30. And then 2 weeks later, you just show up at 7:30. You don't even learn till then anyhow. I saw somewhere Moshe says, you know what it's like? It's like if I go to you, if someone lends you $1,000, and then I go to you, I say, you know what? You borrowed $1,000, borrow another $1,000 from me, and then borrow another $1,000 from me. Borrow another. At some point, you're going to say, one second, whoa, 1 second. I don't want to be in debt for millions of dollars. But that's what the Yetzer Hara convinced us to do. He convinced us to be in debt millions of dollars. He convinced us to take a loan of some of our time today, and then we take a bigger loan tomorrow. Al kain yoimru ha-moishlim. Therefore, the moishlim. What's the moishlim? You can't look at yourself as someone who's in a small gunfight with the Yetzer Hara. You have to be a moishel. You have to look at yourself as big and powerful and important. If you want to be a moishel, if you want to be a ruler, if you want to have power in your life and importance in your life, you have to acknowledge that there is a hefsid to doing a mitzvah. You know what the hefsid is to doing a mitzvah? The small little petty fun that you're going to have to give up. You're going to be involved in something and you're going to miss out on the hak. You're going to not know what happened. You're going to not know if they're dating or broke up. You're going to not know. There's a hefsid to the mitzvah. You have to be able to stare down that hefsid and do the mitzvah anyhow. And same is true the flip side. You have to acknowledge there's a schar to the aveira. There's a joy. Speaking Lashon Hara is fun. No matter who wants to admit it or not, speaking Lashon Hara is fun. It's fun being the center of attention. It's fun having people lean in and say, well, what happened? That's fun. You feel important. You feel good. You feel relevant. It's fun. There's a schar to doing an Aveira. But the only way you can make a proper cheshbon hanefesh, the only way you could change your world is if you're able to stare down that schar and say, I'm letting go of the schar because I am not involved in those things. When you do this, now you have the gift of life in this world. Because it's not just that it changes your Elam Haba. It changes your Elam Hazeh. Do you want to look back when the day is done and say, what I do today? Do you want to look back when the week is done and sit at your Shabbos table and say, I'm not even sure what I accomplished this week? Do you want to look back at the end of a decade and say, I don't even know how I spent the decade? Or do you want to look back at each stage of your life and say, wow, I did that. I'm a part of that. Your Olam Haba isn't just better. Your Olam Hazeh is better. I'll tell you the truth. My mother and I and her, all of our children, we go crazy for her. Even though she's not in my house giving gifts to every single one of our grandchildren every 10 minutes. We go crazy to her because every person we bumped into, oh, your mother, she saved my life. Your mother, she saved my marriage. Your mother, she saved my children. Oh, your mother, I love your mother, I love your mother. So we're in awe that she's our mother. Spending time in big things, spending time in important things, becoming someone who finishes a Masechta, becoming someone who's involved in chesed in a dramatic way, becoming someone who works on a midah until it becomes an inspiration for other people to see is something that you're proud of. Spending time on all of the little things we mentioned here today is something you become disappointed in yourself in. We'll conclude with this. Yitaka b'shayfer gadol, ba'oivdim b'eretz Asher v'anidachem b'eretz Yisrael, v'shtachavu l'Hashem b'har kodesh b'Yerushalayim. The day will come. Yitaka b'shayfer gadol. We're going to sound the big shofar. What does it mean, the big shofar? There's a lot of explanations. But for the purpose of here tonight, the big shofar means the sound of those people who think in a way that Gedolim think. People who think in terms of godless. You know what's going to happen? They're going to bring the Oivdim Eretz Asher, those people who got lost in some American society, and those people who got caught up in whatever the world has sold them. They're cast away and thrown into this trivial lifestyle. All of them are going to come together. They're all going to come together at a point and we're going to stop and we're going to say, this is what matters. And what was all of that? What do we just do? How do we spend the day? How do we spend the weekend? How do we spend the year? Actually, let me conclude with this story. And then I'm really done. I shared this story actually in a shir a couple of weeks ago that was recorded. The story goes, there was a Chiloni man, completely irreligious in Israel. He grew up in a kibbutz. And he was a professor, a smart man. Completely Chiloni Legami, completely not religious. And one day he started to learn a little bit, then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And then he started a little bit of Shabbos, and a little bit of Tefillin, a little bit of Kashrus, and then his wife, and then his kids. Before you know it, within a little bit of time, his whole family became frum. People were like scared to ask, but finally, after a couple of years, someone approached him and said, I think his name was Yuval, what happened? Like, what? You came from nothing. What happened to make your family a Torah-dika family? He says, I'll tell you the story. He says, there was one day I'm a professor, I was driving to university in Tel Aviv, and I stopped at a red light. So now the person listening to the stories knows what's going to happen next. He's going to say that some terrorist came out of the bushes with a machine gun or with a hand grenade or some kind of machete or a pager, something that's going to blow up. And it missed his head and he lived, and because of that he said, wow, Hashem runs the world, and he became frum. He said, no, nothing crazy happened. I was just sitting at a red light. Instead of spacing out, I was staring at the bumper of the car in front of me. And there was a bumper sticker. That bumper sticker changed my life. He said the bumper sticker had on it 3 lines. Hadoeg l'shana. Someone who's worried about the year, yizrachita. Plant wheat. Because the wheat will then grow and you'll make bread that you could eat for the year. Line number 2, hadoeg l'shanim. If you're worried for years, plural yitamata, plant a tree. Because the tree will produce fruit that you could collect year over year over year. He says, but it's the 3rd line that hit me. Hadoeg ledorot. Someone who's worried about generations. Yechanech et banav. Guide your children. He says, I stopped right there at the red light. I said to myself, 1 second. I know what this means because I grew up in a kibbutz. So I know what it's like to plant wheat and then harvest it and grind it and turn it into flour, turn it into bread and eat it all year. I know what it's like to plant the tree and then to bear its fruits, and then you take your baskets and however you're doing, you take your fruits, your apples, the oranges, the pears, whatever you do. He said, I never even thought of that. He says, what am I doing for generations? Give my kids a couple of dollars? What am I doing for eternity? He says, and in that day, at that red light, I decided I need to learn what it means to be a Yid. Hadoeg ledorot. The question that we ask about how we live this life that's big is not just a challenge for you, but how are you supporting your spouse? How are you encouraging your children? How are you encouraging them to live? So last week I got a text message from someone, I don't know from where. He said to me, Rabbi, you said that story. I just want to give you another cute little anecdote. He says, I knew a woman who was completely fry and then became completely frum. And I asked her, what made you frum? She says, I'll tell you. She says, Rabbi Lau, the former chief rabbi of Israel, was a well-known Holocaust survivor. And people would come over to him and say, oh, you were in the Holocaust? Do you remember my father? Do you remember my grandfather? Do you remember my mother? Do you remember my grandmother? She says, and Rav Lau's answer was so powerful. Rav Lau said, I don't care who your father was. I don't care who your grandfather was. I don't care who your mother was. I don't care who your grandmother was. What I care about is who your grandchildren will be. And the woman said, I heard that line and it shook me. Because there are so many Holocaust survivors that were so busy with their past and didn't have enough time to recognize, again, without any judgment, to recognize how important this is. You put on this earth one time to accomplish important things. You were not put here to blaze a little path in the forest. You're put here to appreciate. You were given the gift of life. As long as that gift is, if it's 10 years, if it's 20 years, or if it's 100 years or 120 years, what are you doing with that gift? Are you going to look back and say, my driveway was full of beat up, cheap cars? Or are you going to say, I made space for great things, that I am doing important things? Because no one wants to have the regret that the Netziv speaks of. No one wants to be haunted, because no one wants to be in a veil that's saying you love it, that your whole life is just wasting your time. You want to understand every single day of your life that we are here to serve Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibar, V'Hanoira. And because of that, we're not just going to blaze a little path in the forest. We're going to create a journey as big as the sea. Thank you.